Hello, 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 and welcome to the Astrology Channel. I am Joe G. I am a little obsessed with calendars, I guess. This is what I do. As always, I'm with my good friend Kyle.
I'm Kyle Pierce, and I hate time. I'm at war with time, always.
Aren't we all? But anyways, Kyle, what's happening this week?
Yeah, so not a lot this week. We're sort of lacking in terms of aspects completing, so it might feel a little bit quieter, or just like a lot of what we're doing this week is wrapping stuff up from last week or sort of carrying things over. It's a little bit of a business as usual week for the most part. But we do have the Mars sextile Uranus while being in contra Antitia with Venus, which is interesting. Scorpio season begins, of course, and then we have a Mercury trine Saturn.
Nice. I like that. A nice and easy week for a change.
I don't know if I'd call this week easy, but
At least there's no eclipse in Libra.
yeah, we're done with eclipse season. That's
We'll take that. All right, so with that, let's get into our Monday. As always, Monday is the moon's day. The moon is winning. She's in Gemini, out of element, peregrine, and the sun's deccan in the Saturn's terms, departing from a conjunction to Jupiter, moving towards a Neptune square and a sun trine. This spot in Gemini is very familiar, I think. We've been here for probably about 3 weeks now. The moon just keeps coming back and back again to this spot on Mondays. And last time the moon was here, we were dealing with also a conjunction to Jupiter, but we're moving from a Saturn square towards a conjunction to Jupiter. This time we're moving from the conjunction to Jupiter to a sun trine. And the thing that I was leaning on with this one is just this topic of low lift choices. I feel like the bigger choices have already happened, especially with the eclipse having panned out. But then the moon being in this spot, that kind of begs for that again. Might just ask for like a bit of a follow-up decision, a follow-up question. And so in the image I have baby moon with Jupiter. Jupiter's kind of like a teacher figure, and the moon has two crayons in front of her, like a blue and a red one, and she's just trying to figure out which one should I color this pony with. Not the most life-changing choice, but still something that you might spend some time thinking about just because of the nature of things. But the moon is quick, she comes and goes, won't be that big of a deal.
the moon and Jupiter together is pretty consistently a nice thing when you think about just like the moon as being like what you absorb or how what you're taking in at any given time. Like, it's always good to take in Jupiter stuff for the most part. It's wisdom and learning and lessons about moderation. So I think there is like maybe like finding center again, but also like this in particular seems like a good time to learn something. A good day for study. I very consistently see Moon Jupiter combinations as good for money, but also good for just like absorbing wisdom like a sponge, like absorbing the performance review for the last like few months, like kind of reviewing things and taking in the lessons learned and maybe clearing out the bad lessons and like making more space for the good ones.
Well, on that note, I think that's why we gave it a 2 difficulty score for today. It's not entirely a difficult day, and still a little bit useful too. It's a 2.5, but who should pay attention to this day?
Mutable signs in general, but as special attention on Sagittarius and Pisces.
Well, moving on to our Tuesday, this is Mars's day. Get ready for another mouthful. This is Mars and Cancer, fallen in his element, in the moon's decan, and in Jupiter's terms. Mars is also slow, moving towards a Uranus sextile, soon receiving a trine from Mercury and being received by the moon through a conjunction. Also in Venus's contra Antitia. Mars is slow but busy today.
I like this image on multiple levels because it kind of looks nice on the surface, but there's almost like what is this blood on your dress, mommy? And like that being almost like the foundation with like a lifelong obsession with blood or something, like something that maybe seems innocuous at first, but maybe has longer term implications. Comes to like martial experiences in the early stages of development. Obviously, we're not all in early stages of development or with people who are, but sometimes things are in our lives are in early stages of development. Disruptions to the calm that we like to have in early stages of things, or like things don't get interfered with, fundamentally change them. Not always for the worse. I think there's ways that this can actually kind of work. Venus's contrantitia there is sort of like smoothing out or making milder that experience, or like finding a way to like assimilate it in a more harmonious way. I think the moon being present with Mars sort of maybe it gives an opportunity to like look at those things with a cooler perspective, like a more nurturing perspective, maybe like digesting some like old unprocessed scars deep down in the annals of your personal history.
Yeah, totally. And I think these Moon Mars conjunctions are just important in general. I think it's just these nice moments in the retrograde cycle where Mars gets a little bit of help to continue on doing whatever the thing is. Whatever the thing is that Mars is doing is likely to be something that's not entirely the best, but it's still getting some help every now and then. And that's what I was drawing into with this image. I like that you mentioned this idea of like having martial experiences during these formative moments, because I think that there's definitely a little bit of that. But also with that, what I was really drawing into with this image is this idea of like, it's a child warrior. He's still gonna go through battle. Mommy's giving him a sword and giving him advice and all that stuff, but it's still a child that will have to go fight a war. And I think that that's kind of like the dichotomy of today. It's like, yes, you get help to do this very difficult thing, but that difficult thing is still difficult and you're still not entirely equipped to do it, but at least you have like a little bit of a leg up to continue doing that thing. And today is a very complex day. There's a lot of things going on for Mars, which I think can be a little overwhelming, but the moon also being waning, she can take away some of the anxieties and the brooding and all that stuff that can pile up with Mars and Cancer away. So Mars can at least have like another cycle of feeling fresh and willing to tackle these battles. But yeah, and for that reason, we decided to go with a middle of the road difficulty. We're really debating whether we should do that or not, but right now it's just the beginning of that story. So it's not entirely difficult yet. It's kind of like seeing something coming that is very frightening, but it's still from a distance. So you have some time to like move yourself out of the way or try to do something about it. So that's why we set a lot of 3. And the moon reception really does provide a lot of help in regards to that journey. So I think that today also provides the opportunity to get ready for what's to come. And so we settled with a 3.5 utility.
I think we got to give it to cardinal signs in general, because especially people with placements with towards the end of cardinal signs.
Good luck, guys.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on to our Wednesday to kind of lighten up the mood a bit. Mercury is in Scorpio and sect, because now Mercury is playing for the nocturnal team. Mercury's also visible. Happy heliocal rise, Mercury. And in the sun's decan and in their own terms, departing from a trine to Saturn and soon being received by Mars through a trine. Last week, we were talking about Mercury in Scorpio as kind of having like this bug for mischievous actions, maybe a little bit of blackmail, maybe a little bit of like fuck you Mars. But then I feel like in this week Mercury's kind of like having come around to this martial territory, especially because Mercury's about to be received by Mars through that trine. Mercury's in their own terms, and there's the heliocal rise and all these wonderful things for Mercury. So I feel like this is less of the Mercury in Scorpio, like, let's fuck shit up, and more of a Mercury in Scorpio, like, let's fuck shit up.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Let's find out what was up here. And so in the image, I was just imagining Mercury putting some of those detective skills to good use and kind of having an interview with somebody who maybe is suspicious. Maybe it's that Saturn figure that Mercury is moving towards the trine with. Maybe this person is like a nebulous person and we don't really know if they're good or not. And Mercury's kind of like trying to get to the bottom of what the thing is by asking all the right questions, by going to the bottom of every single situation, every single event. And so I feel like this, even to double down on Monday's studiousness, I think that this can also be a good day for getting to the bottom of things, whether you're investigating somebody or you're investigating like a subject or something. Just it's really a good day to learn all there is to learn about something.
I kind of like this one, if only because there's nothing really gnarly going on, or It's an ability to take a more objective or scientific approach to gnarlier things, which is always useful because gnarly things are always happening. It's giving me big, like, I know not everybody watches Game of Thrones, but giving me big Qyburn vibes, who was like the equivalent of a scholar slash scientist slash doctor who got kicked out of the main institution because he liked to play with dead bodies and do weird experiments on things. And I think this is like, oh, you have a spare dead body. I would not only love to play with it, I can actually probably learn a lot of things about this. By being willing to look at the dirty, the nasty, the ugly, I am able to learn and synthesize things which are of utility to the world at large. I think that there's kind of opportunities for finding ways to like turn conflict or dissonance or unpleasantness through alchemy into something that is more useful, like setting up a chemical process to synthesize a poison into medicine.
And today's not a difficult day for that reason. We settled at a 2 difficulty and a 3.5 utility, which is pretty generous, but I don't think we're overstating how powerful Mercury is in Scorpio right now. But Kyle, who should pay attention to today?
I mean, definitely Scorpio people, of course, but Gemini and Virgo, absolutely, just for being Mercury ruled signs.
Well, moving on to our Thursday, it's Jupiter in Gemini in detriment in his element, the sun's decan, and in Mars's terms. Jupiter is also retrograde and soon receiving a sextile from the moon.
Yeah, nothing terribly dramatic going on here, and I think that's what's kind of nice about it. Jupiter is, fully in its retrograde phase now, and it's starting to pick up speed backwards, and we're kind of like laying out on the table all the options that are available and deciding like which ones we might implement. And there's a sense that there's maybe time to do that. We're not like being terribly rushed, and maybe there's some room to experiment a little bit.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's much to say about today either. It's kind of just Jupiter just station retrograde is just really starting to take some of those steps back. With this one, I was just imagining Jupiter setting his workstation to do the things that Jupiter needs to do. But at least let's make it comfortable. Let's make it organized. In the image, we have Jupiter just setting his machine by a window where he can see a waning moon, just like in the horizon setting. What a beautiful view. Does it help Jupiter's situation? Probably not, but it's at least nice to have something nice to look at while you're laboring away. And on that note, today's not too difficult. It's a 1.5 because Jupiter is truly just starting to get this stuff done. And today's not an incredibly useful day, but because it's so not difficult, some of that utility actually really does pay off. So we settled at a 2.5 with utility. Kyle, who's the person who needs to pay attention to today?
Definitely if you have planets right around the degrees of Jupiter, you might find it more useful than maybe the world at large, within, maybe 5 degrees or so of 20 degrees of Gemini. But definitely Gemini in general, all the mutable signs really, I think, are going to have extra relevance.
Well, moving on, Venus galloping away in Sagittarius, out of element. She's also peregrine in Mercury's decan and Jupiter's terms. She's being left by a moon sextile while moving towards a Saturn square. Last week, we had Venus getting adventurous with a group of very interesting men. Now everybody's just waving goodbye, Venus. Thank you for gracing us with some fine moments. those were moments to be remembered. But Venus now has a mission. She is very swiftly moving towards that Saturn square. And I'm feeling really positive about the Saturn square just because it's not one of those squares where planets are just fighting or going at it for no reason. Venus is receiving Saturn. So it's Venus kind of rising to the occasion to help Saturn out a little bit. And while that may be a little tricky and challenging for Venus, she's leaving this glorious party full of pretty men to now tend to old lady Saturn in the middle of the ocean. Even though there's that happening, she'll feel real good about helping somebody because that's what Venus is.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of like a retreat inward for Venus right now, applying to the Saturn square, almost like a returning to the spiritual well, maybe. I think we're always kind of getting a little more serious the further into Sagittarius that we get. We're getting a little more of like a goal-oriented, Sagittarius is always goal-oriented, but a less about having fun and a more about like what the overall big picture aim and trajectory is, and like what we're willing to do to stay on mission. And I think Venus has, had her fun, maybe had a cake or two, and is feeling like she's looking for something a little deeper. And it's kind of like a time of retreat, of like sort of assessing what the long-term relational agendas are, and kind of retreating into prayer or into perhaps a little bit of solitude in order to figure out what is meaningful relationship and how do I adjust in order to stay on the path toward that.
Yeah, so today is not too difficult. We settled at a 2.5 difficulty and a 3. Like we said, Venus has a mission right now. But on that note, Kyle, who should pay attention to today?
Certainly Sagittarius, but I think we got to look at the Venus-ruled signs, Taurus and Libra, but I want to throw in Pisces in there too, because Venus is sort of exaltation lowered of that sign, and it's having that square with Saturn.
And that's a great segue into Saturday. This is Saturn in Pisces, surprise, surprise, out of element, Peregrine, in Jupiter's decadent terms, soon being received and overcome by Venus through a square.
Yes, I would say the 2 days flow quite naturally into each other, or maybe careen uncomfortably into each other, given that it's a square, but it's certainly a more pleasant experience being on the Saturn side of the square with Venus, I would say. I think overall, what Venus brings to, the equation with Pisces, or what Saturn's like trying to build, structure around, is the idea of what's beautiful in a like broader sense than just the aesthetic level. What are beautiful concepts? What are beautiful ways of understanding the universe and your place within it? Which Saturn, given that it tends to throw a big old wet blanket over such things, there's certainly utility in having a confrontation with Venus, even if it's not a smooth one, or if there's some edge to that. I think it's overall going to be pretty positive for most people. There is a version of it that I don't, which is, sometimes with Saturn in any sign, you kind of get it wearing the costume of the planet in question that rules it. So like Saturn wearing the garb of Jupiter. So part of me imagines like maybe a dirty, lecherous priest, hanging out at church, and in comes, a beautiful young lady who is maybe trying to step away from a life of lechery and debauchery and wants to, seek prayer, wants to do penance. And, dirty Saturn has lots of penance for Venus to do.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, what a day. I was really feeling that sort of like a religious vision thing with Saturn in this square, because not too long ago we had a terrifying vision with the Mars trine, and that kind of like lasted for a little longer. But this one, I felt like this was kind of like a moment where Saturn gets to just like have this super crazy psychedelic revelatory experience, but then either two of those things. Either it's just like an experience that's very awesome for a second, and then Saturn will forget and go back to brooding, or it's one of those things where Saturn is in her boat. She sees the spirit rising from a seashell, but then the spirit asks for something in return for Saturn to reap any of the benefits. And I think that plays really, really nicely with that idea of penance that you were talking about. It's like, yes, maybe Saturn, you want to get out of this boat, you want to get out of the ocean. I'll help you. I'm a mermaid or whatever. I know the ways. But I will want your firstborn child or some shit like that. I feel like it's a magical moment, but it's a magical moment with maybe a bit of a steep price. Yeah, and it's not too difficult day, actually. Like, squares are challenging in and of themselves, but not every challenge is a bad one. So we settled out our 2 difficulty for Saturn and a 3 utility, because there is a lot that can be done. Maybe if we can tap into what it is that we're willing to sacrifice to reap the benefits of this day, that can be an important question to ask. But who should be asking that question, Kyle?
Pisces people have been asking that question for a very long time now. but obviously the Capricorn and Aquarius people. But I definitely want to give a little extra attention to Libra because Saturn is like exaltation of Libra.
Well, moving on to the last day of our week of spooky Scorpio season. The sun is filing in Scorpio. Happy birthday to all the Scorpios watching this. The sun is out of element though in your sign. It's all good though. It's peregrine. It's in Mars's decan terms, being left by a moon sextile and moving towards the Saturn trine. Saturn's getting a lot of attention lately. That's nice because Saturn's been kind of like adrift for a while. The biggest thing that I was sitting with for today, even though a season change doesn't really happen today, it happened a couple of days ago. This is our first Sunday in that season. And so I was really leaning in just this topic of transition. The sun going from being in Libra, from having eclipses, from having all this stuff, going into this spooky place that is Scorpio. And I feel like the interesting thing about that is that there's a chance that Libra felt a lot scarier than what Scorpio actually will feel like because of everything that was going on. Yes, the sun is going to this cave. It's full of spiders. It's spooky. But then we also see that there's this light coming towards the sun. It's not like the light is being shown anywhere else but the sun. The sun is really like at the center of it. And I always like this image of a well-lit cave with the sun in Scorpio. This place that's usually very dark, but then suddenly we can see all the things that are here. And I think that that's a bit of the blessing of the sun in Scorpio. But then a little bit of the curse of that is that we are going into the winter, which is a very unsolar time for the sun. Scorpio is like peak fall. It's as fall as it gets. Everything's going to start to die and wither and look a little sad and not great. But at the same time, we're there. We're living. And there will be another spring to come later on. That's the vibe of the day, I guess. Just sitting with the impending winter that's coming.
I like the sun in Scorpio quite a bit just because no planets really even like to be in Scorpio, but the sun at least is not in Libra anymore. And I think that will be what's most notable is that, like, even if the new throne that the sun sits on does not offer, particularly juicy treats or is especially auspicious of a throne to sit on, there's a lot of relief in just not being in Libra anymore. Like, I may not know what I'm doing specifically, but I'm so over trying to be what other people want me to be. Sun in Scorpio is definitely not trying to do that. And the sun's always bringing light wherever it goes. And, it's kind of cool when you're the sun and you peel back the bark on an old log and watch all the little creatures underneath skitter in response to your light. There's power there. Lots of the things in Scorpio certainly respond strongly to the presence of light. Sometimes they run away, but that's power, baby.
Yeah, totally. It really is. But then actually it's not too difficult of a day with all of those things having been said. So we settled out a 2 difficulty for today and a 2.5 utility. I think that the utility of today is again being faced with the reality that, hey, fall and winter and like darkness exists. And once you are the sun, all that light, and you're able to shine light into those things, there's actually a lot that can be found there. So go find those things, whatever that thing is. Oh yeah, and on Earth, who cares about today?
Yeah, definitely pay attention to your Scorpio and Leo placements.
Well, this is our week, guys. Let's take a look at our week at a glance. Kyle, how's Monday like?
Monday, we're absorbing lessons and learning new things.
Nice. And I think on Tuesday, we continue with a little bit of that learning, but maybe it's more of like an experiential learning. We're like getting our hands dirty with the thing. We're making mistakes because it's that Mars and Cancer story, but then we're getting a little bit of assistance through that, which is not too bad.
Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday we're, playing with bodies and blood and seeing what cool new things we can make out of that.
Yeah. Safely.
Safely, yes. We're synthesizing new potions.
Ooh, nice. I like that. And on Wednesday, we're just staring at the window and getting existential, but getting ready to get busy.
Friday, we're going back to church.
Nice. Saturday, we're continuing with some of that spiritualism, maybe having visions, maybe making sacrifices.
Yeah, Sunday we're, peeling back the bark and watching the critters scatter and run from your great and powerful light.
Nice.
I love that.
Well, let's look at our difficulty and utility ratings for the week. Looks like things are pretty even for the most part. I think we get a peak in utility around a Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday is a little questionable because it's a useful day, but a useful day for getting ready for things that are difficult. But the good news is that it seems like for the rest of the week, difficulty really takes a step back and utility prevails. So that's really nice to see.
Overall, we average out to just about 2 difficulty. There's not a lot of specifically difficult things on a day-to-day basis, and overall, a good 3 in utility. There's quite a bit that we can work with, but I think it's worth maybe noting that the general atmosphere is that we're in this Mars retrograde shadow right now. Mars is about to oppose Pluto. It's going to be happening a bunch of times, and that's going to be, what some might call a shit show. Not necessarily on an individual level for most people, but there will be some shows with, some shit in them laying out in the world. So, stay off the stage, maybe, if you want to stay cool.
Stay off the stage. That's a good advice. Well, guys, this is our week. Not entirely terrible, not entirely great, but that's life. We will all live through it. If you want to book a reading with me, I am Joe G, and I'm at themercuryrising.com.
And I'm Kyle Pierce. I'm at kylepierceastrologer.com. And if you want to learn a bit more about what to expect for the Mars retrograde cycle coming up, you can check out my article. We'll include a link in the notes.